Welcome back to One on One with Mr. U. Of course, I'm your host, Mr. U. Before we bring our guest on, if you're watching and listening for the very first time, thanks again for making us part of your week. We definitely appreciate that. We're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and of course, social media platforms. You can find our episodes there. But of course, if you have a question for myself or our guest today, drop it in the comment or the chat section wherever you're finding this episode. Can't wait to hear from you guys. Before we do that, let's get into our guest for today. So our guest is a speaker, author, podcaster as well, and a coach on boundaries. Can't wait to have this conversation. Barb Nangle is in the house with us today. Barb, how are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
Fantastic. Well, you're here because you know how to help people move forward. And this conversation is going to be about giving our audience practical pathways to advancement, which is the goal of this show. Clear steps, shifts, strategies, tips they can apply right away. So we're going to get into all that stuff that you have to offer. Before we do that, a little bit about Barb, where you're from, Barb, and how'd you get from where you were to where you are right now? Go ahead.
Sure. I'm in New Haven, Connecticut, in the east of the United States. And how I got from where I was to where I am is that in 2015, at the age of 52, I hit a codependent bottom. And just in case people aren't familiar with the term codependent, welcome to the club, because even though I had been in therapy for decades and read tons of self-help stuff and all that, I had never heard the word codependent. So a codependent is essentially someone who's really focused on everything outside themselves, other people, what they want, what they're thinking, what they're doing, what they should be doing, and they really neglect themselves. So the classic codependent is in a relationship with an addict or an alcoholic, but that doesn't have to be the case. And I'd never heard of that word. And I hit a codependent bottom and landed in 12-step recovery, a program called Codependence Anonymous. So in case people aren't familiar with 12-step recovery, they've probably heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is, that was the very first 12-step recovery program ever created. It was developed in the 1930s in the United States. And it was the first time in the history of humans that droves and droves and droves of alcoholics got and stayed sober. And since then, there have been literally hundreds of 12-step recovery programs developed. So Codependence Anonymous was about learning to recover from this pattern of codependence. And I started there, found my way into another program that's called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. I didn't know that I qualified for that program. It's kind of by chance or serendipity that I landed there. And the way I describe that program now is that it's a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself and you use the 12 steps to recover. So I didn't know that I had childhood trauma. I didn't know that I was affected by intergenerational family dysfunction. And that has really been the key for me. So I think it's both the 12 steps of recovery as an amazing technology for human change, as well as addressing the underlying trauma, which we now know is underlying most kinds of like addictions and compulsions and that sort of thing. And so when all that happened, Yusuf, I was working at Yale University as a program coordinator. And so about 2 years into my recovery journey, I got laid off from my job at Yale. And I found my way into the world of startups and innovation and entrepreneurship in New Haven and at Yale, and started my own business. And originally I was just a coach, and then learned as I got more into the world of entrepreneurship that I really needed to have a niche. And it just made sense for me to be a boundaries coach, because codependence is my core wound. I mean, I had years of substance use and all that stuff, but really it was about codependence for me. And boundaries are essentially the antidote to that. So I learned how to build healthy boundaries vicariously through the 12 steps of recovery. But once I got a handle on the boundaries, I started reading about them. And as I learned more and more, I came to retroactively understand, how did I grow up without boundaries? And then what happened such that I developed them? And as I was doing those readings, I started doing drawings because I'm a visual person. And those drawings that sort of depicted, like, if this was in the physical world, what would that boundary look like, turned into handouts. And those handouts ultimately turned into a workbook, which is the backbone of my boundaries coaching program. And I also started my podcast. It's called Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. And frankly, I did not start it with the intention of having it anything to do with my business. I really did it because I learned so much in recovery that I had never learned from a lifetime of personal growth and spiritual development, that I wanted to get that information out into the world. And now it's the number one way that I find, that I get clients is really from my podcast. And so that's the skimming the surface version of how I got to where I am. I'm sure we'll get into more detail if you have specific questions about anything that I said there.
I got specific questions for everything. I'm so
of
excited
course
about
you do.
this conversation. I'm prepared for this, and I get a chance to talk to some folks from back home in my hometown area. I'm from New York City originally, so
okay.
Everybody from up there, I kind of just connect with them instantly. Just seemed to be a very quick, rapid symbiosis. I don't know why it is, but it just happens. So I'm already connected. One of the best books that I've ever read, before we get into more of your work and your story, is a book by Dr. Henry Cloud called Boundaries. That book, in my opinion, it revolutionized how I saw it.
I think that's true for many people. Agreed.
That book is incredible. It's one of those books that I read almost on a consistent basis, like constantly reading it, because I don't have it mastered, and there's so much for me to learn and apply and undo. So it's incredible. I think I'm gonna get into more of that with you. One of the things that I was very moved by hearing about your story is about the 12-step recovery program. I want to ask you a question. This is not really to kind of create a national debate. My shows aren't for that. It's just about, this show's about advancement and helping people get to the place they need to get to as a better person, as a better contributor to this in this life, or what have you, spiritual development wise, that kind of thing. But when I hear people talk about 12-step recovery, what I often hear is they continue to call themselves what they're trying to recover from. In the program that you were a part of, in the boundary, because I don't think it was specifically alcohol related, that I don't think I understood.
No, so I started in Codependence Anonymous, and then I'm also in ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. And I didn't mention it, I'm also in Overeaters Anonymous, and I am down over 100 pounds from my top weight.
Yeah, congratulations on that. That's an incredible feat for sure.
Thank you.
Are you in that camp that you continue to call yourself what you are recovering from as a reminder, or do you kind of reframe and evolve from where you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I say, like, if I'm in an ACA meeting, I say, "Hi, I'm Barb. I'm an adult child," which I don't think this is the same as saying I'm an alcoholic or not. But when I'm in Overeaters Anonymous, I say, "I'm Barb. I'm an abstinent compulsive overeater and sugar addict." That's how I do it. I know that many people believe that. Well, let me just put a pin in that for a second and say that step one in every recovery program is we admitted we were powerless over blank and that our lives had become unmanageable. So let's use alcohol, because most people can identify with that. We're powerless over alcohol. That doesn't mean we're helpless. It doesn't mean we're powerless over life. It means we're like, if we could muscle our way through stopping drinking alcohol. I'm saying I'm not an alcoholic, but I did drink abusively for many years. If you could do it on your own, you would have. So the idea is I'm powerless, and therefore I need a power greater than myself, which is what we call a higher power. Many people call it God. Not everybody does. But the idea is, let's name the problem. The problem is lack of power. And what's the solution when you have a lack of power? A power greater than yourself, right? So that's the foundation. That's the first step of the program. So when you go into the program and you say, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm a recovering alcoholic, or something like that, you're saying, I belong here. This is where I belong. I identify with being here. There are many people who will not say that. They will just say, hi, I'm Barb. Or people in my adult child program might say, loving parent in training, or something like that, or recovered overeater, or recovered alcoholic. So I think,
so they say what they want. They say they believe, well, they say what they want to see.
Right. It's not like, it's not, at least in the circles I've gone in, it's not mandatory to say something, but there's a reason it comes from somewhere. It's not. And the other thing is that, you know, the theory in addiction programs is once an addict, always an addict. You can't be cured, but you can recover. Because if you stop doing all the things that are helping you to stay sober, you're going to drink again. You know, if you don't stay, and so this is one of the reasons why in step 12, part of step 12 says we practice these principles in all of our affairs. So what that refers to is the spiritual principles that are connected to each of the steps in the traditions in the 12-step program. What that means is if you live on the straight and narrow, you are much less likely to relapse. That's just what it means. Like if you live a life of integrity, you're much less likely to relapse because you're living on the up and up.
Got it. I think that makes sense to me now. Okay, I appreciate it. One of the things that, and I want to kind of talk about a lot of the things we just move around back and forth. We do that on this show.
Sure. So. I'm game.
As a podcaster, I'm very curious about the impetus for why you decided to share the level of life lessons and experience that you shared, and kind of made it the focus of your show.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to a lot of folks that come throughout all 4 of our shows. As a matter of fact, they come on, they're podcasters, authors, you know, the whole 9 yards, and they kind of share. When I asked that question, they shared, well, I came from this place and I wanted to help other people. It sounds really noble, nothing wrong with it, you know, but I always want to go deeper. I'm like, okay, so if suppose that you can't find somebody to help, what does your show mean then? So I always want to go deeper because there's always more behind some of those things. Why'd you decide to say, you know what, I'm taking this personal, private struggle and road to recovery and put it in the forefront as a podcast on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, or however we record?
Sure.
Why did you decide that?
Okay, so first of all, I have been podcasting for 7 years. I have 352 episodes, so I've been doing it for a long time. I literally stumbled in my way here. I do know what I'm doing now, but in the beginning, I had no idea what I was doing.
Gotcha.
For me, so another part of step 12 is we carry the message of recovery to those who still suffer. In other words, I want other people to recover, but I carry the message to other people because it helps me strengthen my recovery. And I basically kind of accidentally became a podcaster, which I'll tell you about that in a minute. But what I found, so let's see, I started my podcast in March of 2019. So I was in recovery for 4 years by then. And I was in both ACA and OA. And I found, Yusuf, that repeatedly people would reflect back to me. There was something about the way that I talked about recovery and that I talked about my personal experience that helped them connect the dots for themselves. They use that phrase all the time, connect the dots, connect the dots. And it was very clear there's something that I'm doing that is helpful to people. I don't know what it is. I'm just talking. I'm not thinking, how can I be helpful to them? I'm just like, this is my experience or this is my perception. So
wait, you still don't know, Barb?
Oh, I do now. I know that there's I have the ability to articulate my internal and emotional experience in a way that other people can follow it and resonate and identify with it. And I help them understand themselves because I understand myself. So I do understand that. So what happened was when I decided to start my own business, a friend of mine who was a business coach, but not for anybody like me, said, you should meet with this coach a couple of times. So I met this woman named Katie. And so this was in 2019 and podcasting was nowhere near like it is right now.
Not at all.
Katie said, you should be on YouTube. And I was like, why do people need to see me? I was like, okay, fine. So I went to an adult ed class about how to be on YouTube. And I bought a lavalier mic and stuff. And I never actually started with it. But then somebody I knew in the world of entrepreneurship from networking owned a studio here in New Haven. And he was going to start, I still don't even understand his business model, but it was something like a podcasting channel. And he said to me, I want you to do the sales for the folks that are going to promote on the podcast. And I was like, yeah, I'm not a salesperson. I am a connector. But he had told me that he was having a podcast pitch event where anybody who pitched their idea for a podcast that they liked, they were going to produce it for free for a certain period of time. And I was like, you know what? I think I want to do that. And because to me, that made sense to me, whereas the YouTube thing didn't. And I got introduced to podcasts from recovery. So when I first got into Overeaters Anonymous, somebody said you should listen to these podcasts. And I listened for 2.5 years. Every day I listened to an OA podcast. So I knew the power of delivering recovery information through a podcast. So I started doing the podcast with him. And actually, if you don't mind, can I indulge you in one of my favorite stories? That's a little bit of an aside to this, but it's about becoming a podcaster.
Of course.
So I started listening to audiobooks back when you had to listen to them on a cassette tape. And I had this little
it's a long time ago.
It was before Walkmans even. And I had this little portable recorder and I had these headphones that literally went like this. And I would only listen to them when I was walking so that I would make sure that I got my exercise in. And since the day, I was probably in my early 20s. So we're talking like 40 years ago. The day I started listening to audiobooks, I was like, I want to narrate audiobooks. I want to narrate audiobooks. And I even years ago volunteered here in New Haven for reading for the blind and dyslexic. Like that's how much I wanted to do it. And one day, a few years ago, I met this woman who was narrating audiobooks. And I was like, oh my God, how are you doing that? She said, read this book. It'll tell you everything you need to know. So I created this little mini studio in a closet in my basement and started working on doing that. And I hated it because so little of the time involved is actually narrating. A lot of it is trying to find books, pitching to find books, and then the technical stuff you have to do and all that stuff. And so that happened. I was a couple of months into that when I met this guy that wanted to do the podcasting. So my first 3 episodes, I literally drove to downtown New Haven, sat in his studio with him with me, recorded, and then went home. And after about 3 weeks, I was like, wait a minute, I have a studio in my house. Can I just record it here and email you? And he was like, absolutely, because that's going to save me time because I don't have to listen to you twice. And so like, that's my story of how like that developed, right? So then about 3 or 4 years ago, 3 different times in the same year, I heard from different sources, something like this. If you have a desire that you have had for years and years and years, it's because the universe planted that desire in you. And that desire is going to come out somewhere in the world, whether it's through you or someone else is up to you. And that is the reason why 2 different people can invent the same thing at the same time, which has happened many times in human history. And I was like, oh my God, the universe planted the desire for me to be a podcaster when I was in my early 20s, but it disguised it as the desire to narrate audiobooks because podcasting didn't exist as a technology back then. How cool is that?
I love it. I love podcasting story because mine's is like, it's wild. Short version of it is I got a long history coming up in New York City with radio being in the background of my life. And when 2020 hit, you know, everybody knows what happened. I won't recite that. I got seasons and seasons of shows talking about 2020. So you don't need my help today with that. You get it. I was in a rough spot. And for me, I was trying to find solace anywhere I can find it. The television was not helpful. 24-hour news cycle, constant bad news. I couldn't take it. I was trying to find another way out. And unfortunately, radio was starting to fade away, probably even more so, probably already almost faded away completely by 2020. And I ran into podcasts and I've been listening to it. I heard people who were in the same spot as I was, voices that sounded like me in the same, with the same tenor and same feelings and everything. And I'm like, wow. And before you know it, I felt, I call it an epiphany, for lack of a better word today, to start podcasting. I got almost all the equipment for free and been podcasting nonstop for over 6 years now.
Yeah,
so
great.
To me, I'm like, this is almost 6 years now. So I'm like, this is almost like a calling in my.
Yes, I agreed.
It really feels that way. So I can't shake it if I wanted to. It's evolved since 2020. There's different things. You have 10 shows and you do 16 guest spots. I just have 4 shows that I'm very passionate and focused on. So I love hearing podcast stories. So thank you for sharing yours.
Yeah,
that was amazing. I appreciate that so much.
And I think people need to hear, like, when you have a desire, don't let go of it, no matter what other people say. Like, that desire is in you for a reason. You don't know where it's going to take you.
Yeah. One thing, I mean, I'm definitely with that. For me, I'd even add that, really sit with that thing. It can't just be in the realm of conceptually in your mind. Stick with the thing. Write the thing out. Does it make sense on paper? Because in your head, everything's so great. But on paper, people can see it and analyze it and dissect it. Does it sound good then? So get out of your head, write it on paper, live with that thing, meditate on it, research it, look at it. Does this make sense? Does it mean a need in that place outside of your head? It's a whole different world. And I'm definitely with that, but it's got to happen after that too. It has to take place. It can't just stay in your head. Because people do that, you never get out of your bed 2, 3 in the morning to do that work. Right. It's only here.
Yeah. Yeah. And as Martin Luther King said, take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step.
Just take the first step.
That's the thing, is so many of us think, well, I don't know how to do it. You don't know how to do it. Because if you did, you'd be doing it, right? But you're going to figure out the how by taking one step at a time. You take a step and you get feedback from the world, and then you take another step. You go as far as you can see, and when you get there, you can see further. Absolutely.
One thing you've been doing, you've been helping for professional women, and I love that because a lot of our listeners are professional women. You've been helping them, and I guess in your exact words, stop saying yes when they mean no.
Well, when they want to say no, it's not necessarily that they mean no. They want to say no, but they don't.
So
I think there's a difference between saying yes when you mean no and saying yes when you want to say no. Like, there's a big difference. So I want to be clear. This is women who say yes when they really want to say no.
Okay, I pull that right out of your bio. So let's make sure we make an adjustment on that. Make sure we're saying the same things there. But who are you talking to when you're talking about professional women who are in this place? What have you been seeing? What kind of traits, if you will, have you been seeing that made you want to help them in that regard? Go ahead.
Well, I'm a professional woman. I worked at Yale University for 19 years when I was in recovery. And I actually, my first 2.5 years in recovery, I was still at Yale. And I saw the massive impact on myself, my team, my project, and my organization of me alone building healthy boundaries. So there was this ripple effect that was undeniable. I was like, I'm looking around, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm the only one in recovery here. What's happening? And it just goes to show that when one person changes the dynamics of their interactions, everything around them changes. So I know the potential for professional women. Secondly, I'm a sociologist by training. I have a master's degree in sociology, and I came out of graduate school wanting to level the playing field. And for me, that meant primarily race, gender, sexual orientation. And I really want to help professional women because I was one. And I know that to level the playing field, at least in terms of gender, professional women who say yes when they really want to say no and who neglect themselves because they're so focused on others are not going to make their way into the inroads of the social structures of society when they keep saying yes to stuff they don't want to do. And when they keep neglecting themselves, it's not going to happen. So it's like my mission from before recovery of leveling the playing field has combined with my mission of carrying the message of recovery and spreading healing to people to combine. And then what I see with professional women is many of them are like me, where we look on the outside, like on paper, I looked great. I am a homeowner. I have a master's degree. I worked at Yale University. I had a career. I volunteered. I pay my taxes. I go to church and all this kind of stuff. So on paper, I looked great. My life was a mess. Not only did I have years of substance use and I was over 100 pounds overweight, I had a very long string of super dysfunctional romantic relationships. And I now know, like, all of my other relationships were a mess too. So a lot of women who look on the outside like they really have it together are falling apart internally. So I have coached some super high powered women. I've coached women who are in the C-suite at oil companies. I have coached a Hollywood producer. I coached somebody who was on the board of an international newspaper. I've coached an international model, and all kinds of other women that are professionals, lots of entrepreneurs running their own businesses, and really see that like internally they feel like they're a mess and they have lots of anxiety and lots of worry, and a lot of it boils down to they are super focused on what other people think of them, and that everything they do is about managing some kind of image. Like, I don't want people to think I'm a bad person. I don't want people to think that I'm selfish. I don't want people to think that I'm unhelpful. I don't want people to think that I'm rude. I don't want to hurt people's feelings. Meanwhile, they're not thinking at all about what they actually want and what they desire in their lives. And so I help them kind of turn the focus from out there on people, places, and things and start focusing in here. Like, what is okay with you and not okay with you? And a lot of people, when they come to me for boundaries coaching, are like, well, I don't know what my boundaries are because I don't know what's okay and not okay. Well, the process of learning to build healthy boundaries is figuring out what is okay and not okay with you. What do you like, want, need, and prefer? Where do you end and other people begin? What's your responsibility and what's actually other people's responsibility? So it's not like you come to me and you know that, and I help you figure that stuff out. You figure it out, but I give you the space and the time and the structure to do that so you can figure that out for yourself. And I mentioned the word people don't want to be selfish. I do want to say something about that. It doesn't seem to me that that's an issue for men appearing selfish, but call a woman selfish, you will put her in her place, so to speak. Like, it's like an epithet to call a woman selfish. There's something about being a woman in our society that we have really internalized the idea that it is the antithesis of being a good person is being selfish. And so some people think, well, I'm afraid I'm going to become selfish. Look, if you have been selfless and self-sacrificing your entire life, there's pretty much zero chance you're going to turn into a selfish person. Okay. That's not going to happen because you just don't have it in you. And it's not selfish to take care of yourself. So I love the metaphor. I don't know if you know Ashley Kirkwood. She wrote the book Speak Your Way to Cash. Fantastic book. She's amazing. She says, obviously, you cannot pour from an empty cup. What you want to pour is from the overflow. Well, the only way you can have overflow is if you fill your cup first. No one else is going to or can fill your cup. So what do you need to do on a very consistent and regular basis to energize yourself? And part of the process of building boundaries, Yusuf, is that you start reducing things in your life that drain you and you start increasing the things that energize you. And also, when you live with healthy boundaries, you stop doing all this mental and emotional work, labor. We call it usually emotional labor and mental labor for other people. And you stop being drained by that. So the way that I describe that is, I have so much more energy now that I have healthy boundaries because I'm now living one life, mine, instead of living your life and thinking, what's he going to think of me? Or how's she going to manage that problem if I don't manage it for her? And what are they going to think about me? Instead, I'm thinking about, what do I think about me? And it doesn't mean I don't care at all what other people think of me. Of course I do. Like, I want people's approval. But I don't.
You might have said the don't is lying.
Yeah, I don't need their approval the way that I used to, and a lot of that has to do with I have my own approval now, because I now live in integrity with myself, which I didn't before. I truly believed that I was an honest person when I got in recovery. No, I wasn't. I lied about cigarettes. I lied about drugs. I lied about alcohol. I lied about relationships. But mostly, the bulk of my lying was the people pleasing, overgiving kind of, being overly responsible, bending over backwards for people, saying things were okay when they were not, and saying I'm fine. And meanwhile, I'm falling apart inside. And so I don't do that anymore. I don't lie anymore. And that has been unbelievably enormous. And again, I didn't know that I was dishonest. I thought, I really, truly believed I was an honest person. Nope.
Absolutely. We got time for a couple more questions. Let's see if we can try to get them in today. So, in what you were saying, what you were just describing, where it was not like you were identifying constant worrying, approval seeking, where does effective communication skills come in, and what do you recommend?
So they're really important, but because what a lot of people think is if I just had the right words, then I could set boundaries. And the right words are important, but just because you know what they are doesn't mean you can say them. You have to feel safe inside. This is the internal safety that I refer to. You have to feel like I'm going to have my own back no matter what comes up. So what happens for people is they don't want to say the thing like that's not okay with me, for example, because they're afraid the other person's going to be upset with them. So what they try to do is anticipate what's going to make them upset and then not do that. Meanwhile, they're upset internally because they're not saying what the truth is for them. They're not saying what's okay. So they've prioritized the other person's upsettedness, the other person's feelings over their own. And they do that because they grew up somehow internalizing it's safe, it's only safe for me when the people around me are okay. And if you grew up in a dysfunctional family like I did, the truth is it wasn't emotionally safe. Maybe it was physically safe, but emotionally it was not safe to displease the people around you. The problem is once you've internalized that pattern and then you grow up, it just becomes part of the way that you are, and you have to actually actively purposely change your ways and realize just because I internalized that pattern as a child does not mean that it's healthy. I get to count and my feelings get to count just as much as everybody else's. And in fact, if you're running your own life, which you should be, your feelings should actually be prioritized over other people's feelings because you actually can't manage other people's feelings. You can influence other people, but you can't control other people. Whereas you can control yourself, or you have the capacity. Some people say, well, I've never been able to control myself, but you can learn to. You have the capacity to become able to control yourself. You never will have the capacity to be able to control other people. So this is why keeping the focus on yourself and paying attention to what matters to you, what's okay with you and what's not okay with you, and living from that point is what really matters. And so if you don't have that, if I give you a set of 20 scripts to say when setting boundaries, you might say them and then cave on them because you don't have internally the sense of safety, which, when I say internal safety, a lot of people think that means I'm always going to be calm inside. No, it doesn't. It means despite not feeling calm inside, I'm going to stay on principle here. So let's say that my boundary is that's not okay with me. If I'm shaking in my boots and quaking and quivering, and I say that's not okay with me, and I have all this anxiety inside of me, internal safety is I've got my own back. I'm not going to cave into what you want just because I have a feeling of anxiety inside. I'm going to stay with myself and with my priority, which is that's not okay with me. And I'm going to do whatever I need to do to take care of myself. So one of the ways that I talk about that is my nervous system is probably my highest priority right now. So if I'm totally anxious, I can actually do whatever I need to do to calm myself. If I'm anxious before I say the thing, do I have the ability to calm myself before I say the thing? Or I'm not going to make decisions about my life when I'm all, when my nervous system is all jacked up. That's a sense of internal safety. So it's essentially, I can count on myself to not cave into what other people want or think or believe just because I feel yucky inside. And the more you do it, the more you show up for yourself, the less likely you are to have that internal activation. And, living in alignment with your values is another way that you're going to decrease that internal sense of anxiety because it's a lot easier to stand firm in your boundaries when they're based on something that really matters to you. on your values. And so, the main things that come up for people when they set boundaries are guilt and shame. And so the reality is, you don't have to stop feeling guilt and shame to move forward with setting boundaries. You get to actually learn how to process those feelings yourself. And at the same time, the way to, like, over time reduce the guilt and shame from even coming up is to stay in alignment with your values, to stop abandoning yourself and stand tall and stand firm in what you actually believe. So if you keep setting boundaries in alignment with your values, with what's important to you, it's a lot easier to do that. And the more you do that, the less guilt you're going to feel. And the more you stay with yourself and don't cave in to what other people want of you, the less guilt you're going to feel. So it's like there's this iterative process. You don't flip a switch and all of a sudden stop feeling guilty. So the communication really matters, but not as much as believing you can withstand whatever happens to you if you say the thing and you feel nervous. Does that make sense?
It does. We won't have time for the other questions, but if you don't mind, let everybody know where they can find your work and find you, and then we'll go ahead and close the show. Go ahead, Barb.
Okay, so since you're already listening to a podcast, you can hop on over to mine, which is Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. I used to be on other social media platforms, but right now I'm only on LinkedIn. I'm at Barb Nangle. And then I have tons of free, low-priced and high-priced resources on boundaries on my website, which is higherpowercc.com. That stands for Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. So I have stuff on romantic boundaries, workplace boundaries, personal boundaries, family boundaries. And then, of course, I do private coaching for people who really want to go deep with this stuff. And if you're interested in that, you can sign up for a call with me at barbchat.net.
Thank you very much for your time. Author, speaker, podcaster, and boundaries coach, Barb Nangle.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. That's Barb. I'm Mr. U. Thanks for watching One-on-One with Mr. U. Have a great day. Check out Barb on LinkedIn or barb.chat. You know what you said?
Barb Nangle.
Barb Nangle. Thank you again. Check out Barb. She knows what she's talking about. She's the expert at this. Have a great day. Thanks again for watching and listening. Have a good one.
Thank you.